Hezbollah are so denuded because of this, for them to conduct any effective military operations, I think will be exceedingly difficult. And if their commanders have any sense and intelligence, which I'm sure they will do, the way to the negotiation table will probably get them the best result, rather than now trying to fight the Israelis with at least one hand tied behind their back. Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, former army officer and chemical weapons expert. What we've seen is an extraordinarily audacious attack, presumably, and I think nobody doubts that it was the Israelis behind it and probably their secret service, Mossad. First, we saw thousands of pages exploding. Now, if we just step back one little bit, why are Hezbollah now using pages, which is a very old form of communication? It's clear that having lost a number of senior commanders, probably via their mobile phone, your mobile phone sort of pins you to about a foot square on the ground, and it's very easy for an attacking force to use that mobile phone to guide precision-guided weapons onto it. And yeah, I have a lot of experience of that in Afghanistan, attacking Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Taliban positions using that method. So I think the commanders at Hezbollah realized that that was a vulnerability. So by moving to pages, which is a much older form of communication, the critical thing about it, it doesn't emit a signal. It doesn't geolocate you if you have one of these things, but you can accept messages. And they have been forced to move to that way because, of course, these terrorists are hiding amongst the population of Lebanon and moving around. There are not old sort of landline telephones that they could use in abundance. And of course, if you're mobile, that doesn't really work. So moving to the pages seemed like a good thing. However, it seems that the operation has been exceedingly well planned. And Mossad probably realized that this is what the Hezbollah would do, and have managed to interdict, in other words, have got hold of the pages which Hezbollah ordered. There's a lot of confusion where they came from. The make seems to be from Taiwan. There's rumors that they went via Hungary, but nobody really knows. What is pretty clear, though, is that at some point, Mossad or their technical experts have got hold of these pages and have inserted a very small amount of high explosives. We don't know what it is. It might be something called HMX or PPE or something like that, but a very small amount. And the battery, the lithium battery, and there are always lots of problems with lithium batteries, which is why you can't put it in your luggage in an aeroplane, because they can combust in certain conditions. What they do is generate an enormous amount of heat. So it would appear that somebody has sent these pages simultaneously at the same time, a code, an alphanumeric code, and this has triggered the battery in the pager to overheat, which has worked at what we call an accelerant, which has then caused the explosive to explode. Hence, we've seen these huge amounts of casualties from everybody holding a pager. In a similar fashion, in order to be able to talk one-to-one without using a mobile phone, the next sort of reversionary mode, in other words, step down, would be these push-to-talk radios, which were exploding yesterday. I have a lot of experience of these in Afghanistan and also in Iraq when I was fighting with the Peshmerga against Islamic State. These radios are much more secure than mobile phones. They're what we call point-to-point. So they communicate via various towers that they bounce off, and they're a lot more secure. However, certainly in Afghanistan, we were able to tap into them and listen to what the terrorists were doing, and that formed part of what we're up to. So it would appear that Mossad had also realized this, that Hezbollah command and control would go to these push-to-talk radios, and in the same way, one assumes they also tampered with them, although it could be that the batteries are much bigger in these push-to-talk radios, and if they could have made them explode, then that might be a way. So there's a bit of confusion there. But whatever happens, there has been some tampering with them. So what we saw yesterday in the sort of second phase of this attack is exactly that. So one would expect the leaders to have the push-to-talk radios, and the sort of foot soldiers, as it were, would have the pagers. So that's why I said at the beginning, it's very comprehensive. This is attacking not only the leadership of Hezbollah, but also the foot soldiers. What is also very evident is how much the Iranian government, the Ayatollahs and their politicians and diplomats are also tied into this. We understand that the ambassador, the Iranian ambassador in Beirut, is injured as well because his pager went off, which is why this is such a strategic embarrassment, not just for Hezbollah, but for Iran as well, because it sort of shows that the Israelis are absolutely in and amongst the Iranian command and control too. So, very, very comprehensive. Now, lots of people are saying, what happens next? Well, and of course, we've seen civilian casualties, and that is horrific. Every civilian casualty is to be lamented. But it does strike, I'm sure it strikes people that actually operating in this way is far more effective than what we've seen in Gaza, where tens of thousands of civilians have been killed. It is very difficult to deal with terrorists. And again, from 35 years of doing this in various guises, I know how difficult it is when they're hiding amongst the population. But if, as Mossad seem to have done, they've got hold of their communications devices that they keep in their pockets and have, I think Hezbollah is almost defunct now. They are going to have to communicate with 19th century devices, whereas the Israelis are on 21st. We're back to pen and paper and runners. And the other element to this is in the intelligence guise is what we call human intelligence, human spies, for a better word. And no doubt Israel has spies all over Lebanon. So that's why I sort of say that I think Hezbollah will be very much stymied, as will be the Iranians. So, a very comprehensive, very detailed, very clever, what we call the indirect approach. This is where you attack your enemy's weakness to try and defeat them with causing a minimum of casualties. Really developed by a chap called Basil Liddell Hart after the end of the First World War, where casualties were just on an unbelievable scale. And that is the great thing. And Sun Tzu, always the Chinese philosopher, if you can defeat your enemy without fighting, or the minimum of fighting, that is the way to do it. So, yeah, although there have been civilian casualties, which is terrible, it strikes me as a military and security expert and somebody who's done this all my life is actually, a really effective operation. And hopefully it will bring the Iranians to the negotiation table and to peace, rather than escalate and expand into war. And just to finish on this, I think because Hezbollah is so denuded because of this, for them to conduct any effective military operations, I think will be exceedingly difficult. And if their commanders have any sense and intelligence, which I'm sure they will do, the way to the negotiation table will probably get them the best result, rather than now trying to fight the Israelis with at least one hand tied behind their back. The sequencing of the attack, I think, is as one would expect. You take out the rank and file, if you like, who have these pages. You probably still need to use, I'm surmising here rather than knowing. You probably need to use the push-to-talk network to send some of these texts, I expect. And then in the turmoil, no doubt, in the aftermath of the attack, the command and control, Hezbollah command and control, were all over their push-to-talk radios, probably telling the Israelis an awful lot that they didn't want the Israelis to get. And when the Israelis had sufficient intelligence, they then pulled the plug on that network too. So the next phase to this is going to be interesting. as far as communications, Hezbollah and the Iranians have got two options. They either go back to their mobile phones, and everybody, I think, now realizes quite how vulnerable that is. You can have secure communications via satellite phones, but these are exceedingly expensive bits of kit and very difficult. And as the Americans and others pretty much control the satellite network, unless the Iranians are using Russian satellites, which they may very well may be, this will be exceedingly difficult, particularly to set up in short order, because I doubt that there are hundreds or thousands of satellite phones in the hands of Hezbollah. The other option, as I've discussed, is back to pencil and paper and runners. And in this type of warfare, you need to generate momentum in order to basically act faster than your enemy, get ahead of them. And you're not doing that with pencil and paper when your enemy's got mobile phones and satellite communications. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens next. Electronically, what else could they do? Well, it is possible to turn on mobile phones that are turned off. So one assumes that the leaders and the Iranians still have mobile phones. So that might be the next phase. Whether actually you can make those mobile phones blow up, that is beyond my technical expertise. So we shall have to see. Who knows? The psychological impact. I mean, that is an excellent question, and this really hasn't been unpacked. I know from personal experience what it's like to be under attack, whether it's somebody shooting a rifle at you, somebody shooting a tank round at you, somebody trying to bomb you with an aircraft, and it's pretty terrifying. However, you can get underground, you can put something in your way. But these exploding mobile phones, I mean, that we're hearing, and we've heard from the Times' correspondent Richard Spencer how terrified people are in across Lebanon. When you just don't know, when this thing, this is the sort of stuff of Star Wars and sort of James Bond movies. You see it in the cinema, you don't expect to see it on the street. So again, I think why it is such a smart operation is that there are people saying in Beirut, don't turn your television on, don't go near your sort of landline telephone. So that the inertia that's been created has been phenomenal. So psychologically, I expect it's horrendous. People are sort of putting their mobile phones sort of under their beds, proverbially, as it were, because they're terrified they might go off. And in warfare, psychology is usually 10 to 1 the physical. It's your mind that defeats you, usually long before your body is physically defeated. So, it must be horrific for the civilians in Beirut and in Lebanon at the moment. But I expect, if you're not involved with Hezbollah or Hamas or another terror group, then you probably haven't got much to worry about. But that's me saying it. Very different position when you're on the other end, and I've been on the other end, and I know how terrifying it is. So, I sympathise greatly with the civilian population of Lebanon. I have no sympathies for the terrorists.